My fiancé hooked up with my sister. Instead of being mad, I gave them my blessing. In a past life, my sister and I got married at the same time. I married a college student, and she married the richest guy in the village. The college student became a government official right after graduation, and kept getting promoted. But the richest guy, he became the richest man in the country, then divorced my sister and remarried. My sister's second husband was a worker, and then the layoffs hit. Desperate, he forced her to streetwalk. She caught a nasty disease. When I went to visit her, out of jealousy she poisoned me. When I woke up, we were back on our wedding day. My sister thought marrying someone else would change her fate. But it ended up even worse for her this time. With fireworks going off, a group crammed into my sister's room, stunned by what they saw. Two naked people lay on the wedding bed. Everyone just stared at me. One of them was today's bride, my sister Lucy. The other was my fiancé, David. My mom snapped the quickest, screaming and yanking Lucy's ear. "Lucy, are you crazy? It's your wedding day, and you pull this stunt? Have you no shame?" A few slaps woke her up, but instead of shame, I saw a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. She knelt down right then, begging, "Mom, stop hitting me. David and I love each other. I can't marry Henry. Please let me marry David." David was blushing. He was awake but faking sleep, pulling the covers up when nobody was looking. My mom was furious. "Lucy, that's nonsense. David's your sister's man. But I've already slept with him. Everyone saw. If I can't marry David, I'll throw myself in the river." Lucy had this whole screw-it-all look. Then someone rushed in, saying the groom was only 2 blocks away, telling us to get the bride ready. My mom was losing it. Why today of all days? How do I explain this to Henry? Lucy pointed to me, saying, "Just let Carrie marry him." That's when I realized she had been reborn too. We're twins and both pretty. When we turned 18, matchmakers kept coming to our door. To fund our brother's education and marriage, Mom engaged us to 2 different families. David, the village chief's son, and the wealthiest guy, Henry. Last time, Lucy picked Henry without a second thought. He may be the chief's son, but David was ugly and poor. We even had to borrow for the dowry. But Lucy regretted it when, after just 2 years, she and Henry divorced, and his businesses boomed till he became the richest man in the country. For marrying David, a college grad who became a government official, I ended up envied by all. So this life, Lucy picked David without hesitation. Mom sighed, turned to me and said, "Carrie, I know Lucy wronged you, but Henry's dowry went for your brother's tuition. His family's not to be crossed. Their reputation in the village wasn't great. Henry's dad did time for murder before, and Henry himself dropped out after middle school to live the street life, hanging out with a rough crowd. His mom's mute and recluse, and his sister's temper is nothing like a lady's. So despite the sweet deal, he had to pay a hefty bride price to get engaged to Lucy. Everyone was watching me, knowing how much I loved David. They were eager to see my reaction. Surprisingly, without hesitation, I picked up the veil and wedding dress and walked into the other room. All right, I'll marry him. Henry runs a clothing business, often sourcing goods from the south, and isn't home much. He married to have someone care for his mom and sister. He didn't care who it was. So when he lifted the veil and saw it was me, he didn't react much. At night, he came in reeking of alcohol, and I braced myself. But then Henry pulled out a big bag from the closet and said, "I'm heading south tonight. You sleep alone." He handed me $500 bills for the upcoming month's expenses, telling me to care for his mom and sister. I was shocked. For a family of 6, we barely spent 20 yuan a month. Seeing my face, Henry smirked and walked out. I gathered myself and called out, "Henry." He turned frowning. Is it not enough? He had the look, but his gangster vibe made him seem volatile. I stood, reached into my dowry, and pulled out some ointment. "It's rainy down south. Use this for any rashes." He froze, took the ointment, looked at me with this complicated expression, and asked, "Anything else?" I nodded, then shook my head, mustering the courage to ask, "Can I use this money to buy books?" Living again, I knew not to rely on any man. I was a great student before dropping out because of my brother. I could have taken college entrance exams. My longing for education made me fall hard for degree holder David. But he turned out to be a fraud, his university spot stolen from someone else. Thinking of my past with him made my skin crawl. Henry saw my unease, but misunderstood it as something else. His voice softened. All right. Getting the green light, I cleaned up, cooked, and headed to town the next day. I bought the entire set of high school textbooks at the bookstore, and the owner was in such a good mood that he gave me a copy of Don Quixote for free. He said the book had just arrived in the country and was hard to find. I forced a laugh, thinking to myself it's more like he only got one copy and couldn't sell it. Just as I got home, I saw my mother-in-law drinking water in the living room. "Mom," I called out. She blushed instantly, looking a bit lost, then nodded and started to head back to her room with her cup. As she passed by, she stopped, her eyes fixated on the book I was holding, full of interest. Seeing her gaze, I handed her the Don Quixote. "Do you like this book? You can have it." I was hoping to get closer to Henry's family, but as soon as I said that, my mother-in-law's eyes filled with tears. She started sobbing, covering her mouth. I panicked a bit, unsure of what to say next, when a sharp voice rang out behind me. "What did you do to my mom?" I turned around, and there was a girl with oily hair and ill-fitting clothes at the door. I figured this must be Henry's sister, Linda. Linda rushed over, shielding her mom, glaring at me with hostility. "You wicked woman, are you bullying my mom? I swear, if you even touch her, I'll have my brother throw you to the wolves." I didn't get a chance to explain before my mother-in-law spoke up. "It's not her fault. I'm just overwhelmed." Linda and I both stared wide-eyed. "Mom, you can talk?" Half an hour later, I found out Henry's mom could actually talk. She'd just pretended to be mute because she didn't want to deal with people. She told us she didn't like social interactions and only enjoyed reading. But since Henry's dad went away, her kids didn't understand her, and the villagers laughed at her because of their family issues. She became more withdrawn and stopped speaking. Also, she hadn't read anything new in a long time because she rarely went out. Hearing all this, I was shocked. In my past life, I heard my sister complain frequently that her mother-in-law was mentally challenged. She used to brag about making her serve like a maid for just a bun. That's when I realized how outrageous my sister's behavior had been. Henry's mom wasn't oblivious to the bullying. She just chose not to care. Both Linda and I felt bad for this woman. We immediately asked her to make a book list. After a night passed, Linda and I went to town to buy a bunch of books. On our way back, I noticed Linda acting weird, staring at this guy in the bookstore. As someone who's been there before, I knew what that look meant. I teased, "So you like him?" Linda blushed, "None of your business. If you like him, go for it." My words got Linda a bit riled up. "But he doesn't even like me. He thinks I'm ugly." My sister had mentioned this before in my past life. Linda had a big crush on this top student, but after getting rejected, she cried all the time at home. My sister got fed up and set Linda up with a shady guy. That guy turned out to be a jerk who not only spent the night with Linda, but also robbed her family. This incident led to Henry finding out about my sister's antics, and he divorced her in anger. While I was thinking about all of this, Linda stomped out of the bookstore upset. I caught up to her and offered, "I can help you win him over." Linda's eyes went wide. "Really?" I nodded. First, I took her to the bathhouse for a wash, and then bought her some new clothes, replacing the dirty ones she had on. Then we went to the salon for a fresh haircut. Linda looked in the mirror, transformed. "Is this all it takes for him to like me now?" I shook my head. "This is just the first step." "What's the second step?" "Go back to school and study. I heard he's the top student. If you want him to like you, you've got to be top too." Linda looked deflated. "I can't do that." I smiled. "I can help you." From that day on, a new harmony formed between me, Henry's mom, and Linda. I bought books for his mom, and she helped with the chores. In the evenings, we'd sit in the living room. I'd tutor Linda, and Henry's mom would read. When Henry came home, that's the scene he walked into. He coughed, and Linda ran over to hug him. "Bro, you're back." Henry looked at her in disbelief. "What happened to you?" Linda grinned. "It's all thanks to my sister-in-law." Henry glanced at me, and I blushed, quickly heading back to my room. Not long after, Henry came in too. He thanked me. "I've heard about everything. Thanks for taking care of my mom and sister." I waved it off. We're married after all. Your mom and sister are my family too. No need to thank me. Henry paused, then suddenly smiled. All right. From that day his attitude changed. He started being friendlier instead of cold. Whenever he didn't have to work, he came home. He'd bring little gifts for me whenever he went out. Over time, it really felt like we were living a normal life. I realized Henry wasn't as scary as others made him out to be. Sometimes he was downright adorable. Time flew, and the day to visit my parents' house again came. I put on a nice new outfit and carried a bunch of gifts. Just as my sister arrived with 2 pounds of pastries. She looked a bit shabby. She and David had given up on a wedding after the fiasco at my wedding. She glanced at Henry next to me and immediately lifted her head, puffing up with pride as she stormed inside. Who would have thought that my mom would just ignore my sister and head straight for us? She took the stuff and started chatting with Henry, asking how he's been. My sister couldn't take it anymore. Mom, aren't you going to ask about David too? Reluctantly, my mom turned to me. Oh, how's David doing lately? My sister puffed up her chest. David just got notified that he's supposed to report to the county tomorrow. I have a feeling he's going to make it big within 5 years. By then, I'll be a politician's wife. Nobody in the room cared about her comments. They just turned their attention back to Henry, asking him about fun places in the South. My sister was annoyed and shouted my name, Carrie. I looked up at her. She had something to say to me. Let's go make dinner. In our house, the men don't cook. So my sister and I went into the kitchen. As I was getting ready to start cooking, she leaned over and whispered, "Tough taking care of them, huh? His mom and sister aren't exactly normal." I knew what she was up to, trying to drive a wedge between us. Not really. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law are pretty considerate. They help with laundry and cooking. Especially my sister-in-law. She always thinks of me when there's good food. I can sleep as late as I want. It's a lot better than waking up at 5 to look after everyone. My sister's expression changed. You gotta live in that house to know how daughters-in-law are treated. David's parents and 2 younger brothers all depend on her. She has to do all the dirty and hard work. It's only been a few days, and she already has calluses on her hands. She bit her lip and chuckled softly. I heard Henry left on your wedding night to do business. Know why he likes the South? Because there's someone named Molly on his team, and Henry's into her. Hearing that name, I paused my work. Molly, Henry's second wife. Pretty much everyone knew that as Henry rose from being a small-town entrepreneur to the richest guy around, she was always by his side. Noticing my reaction, my sister continued, Henry's really nice to Molly. He takes her everywhere, and she handles all his money. There's that saying, where the money is, that's where the love is. I felt a chill, biting my lip hard. Then the kitchen door swung open, and Henry walked in with a brooding look. My sister instantly went silent. She doesn't have the best memories of Henry, and seemed a bit scared. I remember in a past life, when they divorced, Henry used some tricks to frighten her. So even when she was down and out, she never sought trouble with her wealthy ex-husband. Henry came in and went straight to my sister, saying something cold to her in a low voice. All color drained from her face, and she clenched her fists. Henry, you jerk. Then she stormed out of the kitchen. I stood there dumbfounded, staring at him. What did you say to her? Henry shrugged. I told her, if she keeps talking nonsense, I'd cut out her tongue. I didn't know what to say for a moment, until my mom called from outside, Carrie, don't cook. Henry's taking us out to eat. I nodded, turning to leave, and then Henry quickly walked over, grabbing my hand. You believed it? What? The stuff she was saying? I shook my head no. Then why do you look so upset? Thinking for a moment, I said, Henry, if you really like Molly, I can step aside. His expression turned anxious. Why would you think that? There's nothing between Molly and me. I had her handle the money because she's good with it, and she's in business too. There are others with us besides Molly. I don't like her really. His earnestness startled me. We'd been living together a while, and it was the first time he had said so much. After hearing him out, I nodded and quietly added, if you ever fall for her, I'll divorce you. Just don't. I wanted to say don't treat me like you did my sister in our past lives. But before I could finish, his warm lips were suddenly on mine. A surge of heat rushed from my mouth to my ears. When he pulled back, His face was still stern. I'll say it again, I don't like her. I like you. I felt dizzy. I couldn't tell if it was from the kiss, or that I like you hitting me hard. After that day, Henry started keeping his distance. He got back the money he'd left with Molly, and said he wanted me to handle it. I worried this might change Henry's fate of becoming a tycoon, so I told him not to worry about the money. Molly's great at making money, and she should manage it. But no matter what I said, Henry wouldn't agree. He claimed he had to uphold his duty as a husband, and couldn't have dealings with another woman. Then I thought of news I'd heard the year he passed, that housing prices in the capital city were skyrocketing. So I took Linda there. Wanted to show her the top universities, and also snapped up a few houses with Henry's savings. When we got back, I heard Henry planned to stop doing business with Molly again. I rubbed my forehead, remembering he made it big with a clothing factory in his previous life. I suggested he build a clothing factory here, and recommended a famous designer. I even urged him to get into real estate. I know it might seem like cheating, but I genuinely didn't want Henry to miss out on a great future because of me. Henry was busy with the factory, while I prepared for college entrance exams. Linda was going into her senior year, and I discussed with him about going back to school. He wholeheartedly supported me, but my family kept trying to talk me out of it. They told me I was too old for school, and with Henry doing so well, I should have a kid to secure his heart. That's when I realized my sister wasn't having a great time with the Davids family. They treated her well enough the first year after marriage. This year they started pressuring her for a baby. David got transferred to the city, and my sister wanted to go with, but David's family didn't want to lose their housemaid, so they said no. My sister cried herself to sleep, saying it was impossible to have a baby when they hardly ever saw each other. Not that seeing him would help, since David was infertile. I didn't listen to my family. Linda joined school at the same time as me after the break. After a year of hard studying, Linda and I got into a prestigious university. Once Linda started college, she successfully started dating a boy she liked. She hugged me and cried, "Sister-in-law, without you, I wouldn't have even dared to dream of this." We spent a year in college. Henry rode the tide, becoming the richest in the city from the richest in the village in just a year. When I went home for break, I hadn't even had a chance to see Henry when I ran into my sister. When she stood at the door, I barely recognized her. She had gotten much thinner. Clothes couldn't hide the marks on her body, and her eyes were filled with fear. She used to be such a pretty girl, but now she had no spirit at all. I wasn't surprised seeing her like this, because in my past life, I was nearly tortured to death by David too. After David found out he couldn't have kids, he stopped those bedroom activities. He acted cowardly at work, then came home to vent his frustration. When he couldn't release it in bed, he chose another way to vent, by hitting people. He was bloodthirsty, enjoying the thrill of hitting. At first, he'd pick fights for an excuse to hit. Later, a mere glance could make him throw something at me. Sometimes it was a cup, sometimes a chair. When she saw me, she grabbed my arm and shocked me by saying, "Carrie, you're reborn too, right?" I steadied myself. "Reborn? I don't know what you're talking about." But she wouldn't let go, kneeling. "I know you are. Or else you wouldn't have married Henry so readily, nor given him so many ideas. Sister, save me, help me." She only called me sister when she needed something. Even though we're twins, and I came out a few minutes earlier, I ended up being the older sister. Our parents favored boys over girls, so we depended on each other growing up. I've always seen myself as her older sister, always thinking of her and letting her have her way. Even in my past life, after being beaten nearly half to death by David, when she wanted a divorce, I left the hospital, dragging my sick body to beg Henry. Otherwise, with Henry's personality, how could a mere scare be the end of it? But I never expected that my desperate efforts to save my sister. She envied me, wanting me dead. Just because I wore a clean dress to visit her when she was sick, she mixed her blood with pesticide into the water cup I drank from. Before I died, my sister smiled brightly. "Carrie, we're sisters. Why should you live well while I suffer? It's not fair. If I die, we'll die together." Thinking of it all made my heart harden again. "Lucy, I can't save you. Find someone else." "No sis, you can't ignore me. Her tears and snot smeared my clothes. Look at the life you're living now. A villa in the city. A car, designer clothes, better skincare. This should have been mine. I let you have it. You swapped lives with me. You owe me. I lost my patience. What do you mean I swapped lives with you? Do you remember why you married David? She went silent. How could she forget? She secretly seduced him, drugged him, and kept him in bed. Rumors spread in the village, which can destroy a person. Even though I married Henry, people still talked, focusing on me. I was scolded behind my back by many, but I was also a victim of this situation. So why bring me into it when scolding the two of them? Her tears stopped. Her mouth opened. I just prepared to ask her to leave, but she clung to me tighter. Carrie, I know you have a way to stop him from hitting me. You have to tell me, or I'll reveal Henry's past. I froze. What past? According to her, Henry smuggled illegal stuff when he started his business. If she told the police, he'd surely be caught. I doubted it. If my sister had anything real on Henry, why didn't she report it despite all the suffering? She said that by the time she divorced Henry, he had solved that problem. Checking the timeline, she seemed right. For Henry's sake, I sighed and told my sister, if you want to get rid of David, there's only one way. Report that there's a body under the persimmon tree in his yard. In my last life, when I couldn't stand the beatings anymore, I wanted a divorce. Went to his office, found everyone calling him Ken. Then I realized David hadn't passed the college entrance exam. His dad had him replace Ken's spot. Ken was also from our village, orphaned, and went missing 3 years ago. After discovering this, I overheard David and his dad talking. Turns out Ken confronted them about switching places in David's junior year and got killed. They buried him under that tree. When I found out, I tried to report it, but got discovered by his family. I appeared at his office. Maybe it was to maintain a good image, or for other reasons. He stopped hitting me but kept me close all the time, even having someone watch me when he wasn't around. Seeing my sister so eager to leave him, I honestly thought she'd report it, but she didn't. Instead, she told David about it. 2 days later, she rushed to me, saying Mom was sick, asking me to go to the hospital with her. I got in the car with her, but soon noticed we were off the main road. Where are we going if not to the hospital? I asked. She said sorry. My heart sank. What do you mean? The car stopped in front of a small cabin in a desolate area. When I saw David walk out, I realized everything. I looked at my sister in disbelief. You didn't report it. She shrugged. If I report it, he'd get arrested. I just don't want him to keep hitting me. I don't want to lose him. Crazy. I never expected my sister to go so crazy, doing something like this for status. I yelled, so, you sold me out? My sister looked totally innocent. You were the one who told me about this. Don't worry. David just wants to talk to you. I screamed, do you really believe that? He's a killer. She shrugged, like she didn't have a care in the world. That's when I realized how dangerous she was. The door opened, and even if I wanted to run, I couldn't take on a man. I was forcibly dragged into a hut filled with tools. David grabbed my face with a twisted expression. How do you know my secret? I shivered in fear. I have no idea. David laughed. Doesn't matter how you know. You're not getting away today. He took out a rope to tie me up, and a wave of despair washed over me. I cursed myself for being so stupid. My sister had already screwed me over in the past life. And here I was, trusting her again. Tears started streaming down my face. Just as David lifted a knife towards me, my sister's scream echoed outside. The door was kicked open, and a few people rushed in to restrain David. Henry walked in, backlit by the sun. In the next moment, I found myself wrapped in his familiar embrace. Feeling his warmth, I couldn't hold back anymore and started crying my heart out. Henry gently touched my face, his eyes filled with deep concern. Carrie, I'm sorry I was late. I shook my head. No, you're right on time. Nearby, David started shouting. What do you think you're doing? Do you know who I am? Before he could finish, Henry kicked him hard. David screamed in pain, tears streaming down. Henry, how dare you treat me like this? My dad. Henry grabbed his hair and slammed his face, his voice cold and steady. What about your dad? Cops already visited your house and took him away. David's eyes widened. What? Henry narrowed his eyes, You mess with the wrong person. My wife. Soon the cops arrived. They must have found the body under the persimmon tree and came to arrest Ken. My sister was also being taken away. Before getting in the car, she suddenly went crazy, running to Henry and clinging to his pant leg. Henry, I was supposed to marry you. I'm your real wife. Please help me. I don't want to go to jail. Henry kicked her away, unable to hide his disgust. Stop with the nonsense. Carrie's my only wife. You were the one who broke the engagement. I regret it now. You guys aren't legally married yet, right? You used to like me, didn't you? I've changed. I'll take care of your mom and sister. Be with me. She rambled on, but Henry's expression remained unchanged. He shouted, get lost. Stop bothering me. My sister was taken away in the end, and Henry took me home. The whole way his face was tense. When we got home, I was about to get out of the car when he scooped me up. His friends started teasing, and I blushed, burying my face in his chest. A minute later, I was laid on the bed. Henry was over me, not going further. He just stared intensely, voice low. Carrie, what's going on here? When my sister approached me, I felt something was off. So I asked Linda to find Henry and tell him about the secret under David's persimmon tree. Henry has a lot of connections, and it didn't take long to find out people saw me getting into a car heading to the hills. That's how he tracked and saved me. But he still couldn't understand how I knew David's secret, or why my sister said such odd things. With his sharp mind, I knew I couldn't fool him, so I spilled everything. By the end, I felt a bit guilty. Believe it or not, I've lived twice. It's like a dream. As soon as I finished, he held me even tighter. I could feel him trembling in my arms. I touched his back gently. What's wrong? How dare she? How could she hurt you twice? I realized then he was upset at my sister for hurting me. I didn't get why she turned out this way either. She was so sweet as a kid, always sharing her treats with me. People say twins can sense each other's feelings, and I guess it's true for us. Whenever I got sick, she'd feel it too. Even if I twisted an ankle, she'd say, Carrie, my foot hurts like hell. It was these memories that made me trust her with the secret. Henry's eyes were full of pain. So in the past life, was I bad to you too? Not really bad, we were strangers. You didn't know me anything. I touched his head, I don't know why, but Henry reminds me more and more of a big loyal dog. Do you think you'll be the richest nationwide this time with me? I was just joking, but Henry kissed my hand and said, I'll try my best. I'll make sure those who hurt you pay for it. I nodded and asked if what my sister said was true. He sighed, tapping my forehead. You worry too much. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I relaxed. As long as he's safe. 2 months later, word from the prison came that David had died. It was said he fell and hit his head. But the truth was, he messed with the wrong people inside and got beaten to death. I asked Henry if he had anything to do with it. Henry smiled, shaking his head. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I just visited some old friends before he went in. I had heard Henry had a friend who went to jail for an accidental killing. In this day and age, prisons aren't as strict as they used to be. It's not even surprising when someone gets beaten to death inside. My sister didn't take part in that incident, so her sentence wasn't severe. But she still suffered a lot in detention. When she got out, she seemed out of it, like she wasn't all there. Our family thought she had lost her mind, so they sent her to a psychiatric hospital. She wanted me to visit her, but I acted like I didn't know. A few days later, my sister jumped from the mental hospital. I heard that before she died, she kept saying, let's do it again. Life just kind of drifted along, not too exciting, not too dull. Soon Linda and I graduated from college. After giving it a lot of thought, I decided to go for my master's and PhD. Henry said he supported me and dressed really sharp to see me off at school. By my second year in graduate school, Henry made it on the national rich list. We even had a kid together. Linda and her husband became civil servants, and their careers took off. The biggest surprise was Henry's mom. At 50, she published a novel and became an author. This life of mine is still as dazzling as ever. But compared to my last one, it's so much happier. The end.